Hey, thanks for joining me today. Very excited for today's episode. We're going to be talking with Javier Jorge, SBA Director at Pilot Bank. Javier is one of the rising stars here in Florida. I know him personally. I call him a friend. Hopefully he feels the same way about me. But for the amount of time he's been in the industry, it's just amazing to see what he's been able to achieve. So I'm really looking forward to getting inside of his head. He is a producer, he is a manager, he's also an entrepreneur, and hopefully we can learn a little bit more about him today. But before we get started, I just wanted to remind you, we have that BDO retreat coming up in Fort Lauderdale. It's a chance for SBA BDOs to come down, relax, unwind, share best practices. It'll be an intimate event, about 20 of us or so. I think there's a couple spots left. So if you're interested, just RSVP to my email, rdrew@fundexsolutions.com. We'll put it in the show notes, and let's get into it. Hey, Javier, thanks for joining today. How you doing?
Thank you. My pleasure. Happy today's what? Happy Thursday.
Yeah, I was ready for your tagline that you always give me every time we talk. You know what that is?
Another day, another dollar.
Yes, sir. How many dollars do you have at this point?
How many days since we talked?
One. All right. Well, let's jump right into it. You've been in SBA for a number of years. Been quite successful. We'll get into that in a minute, but I just want to start at the beginning. Yeah, knock on wood. How did you get into SBA?
Oh, that's going to be a very easy conversation, Ray. It's my first bank that I worked at back in 2013. 2013 at C1. The CEO one day stood up at our office in St. Petersburg, looked around the room, it was an open floor plan, and he had a problem. He had to figure out who he was going to send to South Florida to start the SBA region for the bank. And I think, I don't know but he pointed at me and said, okay, this Cuban guy who doesn't stop talking might be able to do something with SBA. And at that moment, I had zero background, zero experience with SBA, and very little banking experience in general. But the CEO said, hey, it was September, and he says, could you be in Miami by October? And so 1 month later. And I said, yeah, why not?
Okay. So is it right that you were doing some sort of training program at that bank to kind of get your feet wet?
So yes, I did a management associate program. And that management program was 6 months, and it was a rotation throughout the bank, right? So you spent a couple weeks in each position, right? So a week or two as a teller, assistant banking manager, throughout the entire bank outside of marketing and accounting. We basically touched a little bit of everything, which was extremely informative, especially for someone that had no banking experience prior. It was a program that wasn't a guaranteed job at the end of it. And I was fortunate enough, it was a 50% pass rate. I made the cut. So I'll take that as a positive. And we were assigned different positions in the bank. My role straight out of the program was the loan operations analyst. My whole job was just to learn the entire lending process and figure out how to automate or use technology to drive greater efficiencies throughout loan origination, loan or underwriting, and loan operations and servicing.
Okay. So you get a taste for different things, and I'm sure that helps, diversify yourself going into this. But essentially you fell into SBA, like as did many of us. And
exactly.
This is where things get interesting because your career progression has been so fast because you were a BDO at that bank for a few years and then went on to your next venture, which was, you know what, let me just go to the top and become an SBA director at a bank and start up anew. How did that work?
Funny enough, I think a lot of this, Ray, is being lucky rather than good, right?
So I wasn't going to say it.
Well, I said it for you, right? I'm the luckiest guy on the planet right now. And the reality is there's a lot of luck to it. But, in my book, luck is when opportunity meets preparation, right? So ultimately, I've always had that goal. I knew from the very beginning that I wanted to run a division, right? So that was one of my goals. And I've always understood that the opportunity, I don't know when that would present itself, but I need to develop greater skill sets, understanding beyond just the front end of the house, but also the underwriting more detailed, more understanding on the operations side, on the servicing side. And those are things that I continue to learn, right? Some of the things that I did in early in my career, and I still do today, is I like to learn, right? I look over your shoulder and I see a lot of books, right? So that's something that I do very much, right? I at least read. I try to read one book a month, right? And try to consume as much information as possible, because in my mind, if you're not progressing, you're regressing, right? So I preface that by saying that although I had no prior experience, I had been gaining significant amount of book knowledge, but nothing practical, right? Nothing in the real world beyond my BDO activities that I was doing at the time. The opportunity presented itself fairly, serendipitously. I was reached out via LinkedIn by the CEO of First Green Bank, who I had never met before, who I'd never known, and he just hit me up on LinkedIn and asked, if the team I was working with was interested in moving to his bank. I kindly replied that my team, me and my other BDOs and my manager at the time, were not interested in moving as a package, but I would love the opportunity to have a conversation with him. So we had lunch. We hit it off. He asked me a few questions about if I had the opportunity to run a SBA division, what would I do? And surprise, surprise, I had an answer for that question. And apparently he liked it, right? And here's the funny, like, yeah, I think a lot of the entertaining parts are the details, right? So we have,
Yeah.
there's one of the senior lenders at that institution. He shall remain unnamed for this purpose, but
Okay.
the CEO said, "Hey, talk to this guy, because I want another person to feel you out, because we're having a good conversation. I want to make sure that I'm not crazy." So I go immediately after my lunch with the CEO. I go have a happy hour drink with this individual, and he asked me straight, questions, production, process, experience. I thought the conversation went well. I answered transparently, um, and well, about a couple months later, I get an offer, and I start that position. I come to find out after I started the position that that individual went back to the CEO. Was like, "I have no idea why you're going to hire this guy. He has no experience." And the CEO was like, "I mean, neither, but let's give him a shot, right?" So let's be honest, right? It was a long shot to jump from BDO for a couple years to director, but somehow, some way, the stars aligned, and the right words were said, and the position was granted. And it's like anything, right? You get a shot. You got one chance to take it, and I took it, and it landed. And it's been, I guess, a consistent item of my career, right?
Right.
Taking chances.
Well, let me stop there because you said a couple of really important things. And by the way, you were successful in that venture, so they ended up making the right decision. And we'll talk about that in a second. But why did you actually, before I even go there, you mentioned the books and you mentioned LinkedIn. Two of the most influential parts of my success. The books, it really does open your mind to what's possible and gives you a lot of the resources to make it possible. So I can't emphasize that enough. So I love that you said that. And LinkedIn has been incredible for me. And look at these opportunities that come simply by having one. And
Hmm.
if you're active on it, that helps too. Now, you wanted to go into management, you wanted to spread your wings, try different things, grow as a professional. And I totally understand that. But did you have any thoughts about, this BDO life is pretty good. I get to do my
Oh,
own thing. Why,
are you
why did,
kidding?
what was that decision in your head going this route or that route?
Okay, let's just be very clear. The best life in a bank is the BDO life. Forget management and forget any other position at the bank, right? Or any general lending financing institution. BDOs have the best life, right? We get to talk to entrepreneurs every day. We get to learn about business models and business plans. We get difficult problems that we have to, we get to deal with clients, right? And, rewardingly, we get to play, probably one of the biggest financial decisions of these people's lives. We play a part in, right? And a direct correlation into the success or failure into the growth of their business, right? So that process doesn't exist anywhere else in the bank. And it's, in my opinion, one of the most rewarding activities that you can have, right? There's nothing more, you know, probably outside of a contractor building a house, right? Where you can tangibly see what you're building. We get to develop these relationships with business owners, and I know you know this, Ray. You see them grow up, man. I mean, you see them. Sometimes my best clients are my repeat clients, right? The ones that have successfully worked on let's say, a small balance loan, and then I've graduated onto another level, then another level after that, and then my favorite is when you tap them out from an SBA,
Mm.
max lending capacity. That lifestyle is phenomenal. Why did I not want to do that forever? Well, a couple things. I'm a very ambitious person, right? So I want to personally find out where my ceiling is. I don't know where it is, but I want to look back at my career and say that I reached it. I don't know if I'm here, if this is it, but I knew that from a business development perspective, although that life is phenomenal, um, there was more challenges that I wanted to do, and there's a couple downsides from a BDO component, especially when you're restricted to a geography, is that your network ends up being your career, right? Because once you have that momentum and that in those true tentacles into that market, you're not going to be able to move, right? You're not going to be able to, let's say you wanted to get a job in California. That's going to be a difficult ask, right? I mean, Ray, you go nationwide, but in my world, I was always stuck in the state of Florida. So it'd be difficult for me to move my contacts, right, from a BDO perspective. But my management and director skills transfer across state lines, right? In that situation. So that's always strategically something that I took into consideration. And here's the other one, and this is where my head always leans towards. I'm a technology first person, and I have this sincere thought. You and I are probably safe and probably the next generation of BDOs, but at some point, the jobs that the BDOs do, technology is going to come in and take a big piece of that. And I think we're starting to see that more and more as the years could go through. And at some point, I do believe that the good life that we have today isn't going to be the same one that's going to be 5-10 years from now. And personally, I wanted to mitigate that risk by trying to be the disruptor and not the disruptee.
That's very forward thinking. And that's something we talk about here. And it's so hard for folks in our industry to think that far ahead because it's been the same for so long. But
Hmm.
I 100% agree with you because BDOs were so valuable for so long because it was your entryway into a market and everything's
Hmm.
gone digital and online. So why would you be paying sales managers? Close your ears. I don't want my friends to get me in trouble. Paying BDOs money to go find business when they're not even doing it in their backyard anymore. They're just going online and going out to market on a national scale in many levels, like myself. And the business is there, and it's a lot easier to find it with the internet. So more and more people are embracing it. Still not as many as you would think in that model. It's the BDO model is largely still what's in
Hmm.
in our industry right now. But you're absolutely right. Now going back to you, the first Green Bank venture that was starting it from scratch, right? They didn't have an SBA division already, so you're growing it, you're building it. So that first year, like what was the challenge? What were the challenges there?
Oof. Talk about a learning curve, right? So, a shop that had never done SBA in the past, the CEO that was there who recruited me had only been there for about 6 months. He came in to basically not turn the ship around, but help it get to the next level, right? So I'm gonna time travel back in my mind to 2016 when I joined First Green, and they were about $400 million in assets, right? And they had been there, slow growth. I think they started in 2008. So you're talking about 8 years of growth to get to 400 million. That's no one's really excited about that. So they bring in the new CEO, and he has a new philosophy, right? So his philosophy is we got to grow the balance sheet, but we also got to grow profitability, right? Which is important. So balance sheet growth came from traditional commercial lending, across an expanded footprint, right? He expanded their footprint down to South Florida and Fort Lauderdale. But then the more important, he added two verticals that really drove profitability to the bottom line in non-interest income. One residential, and drum roll please, SBA, right? So SBA, as everyone knows on this podcast, right, drives a significant amount of non-interest income if you participate on the secondary market. So from an efficiency perspective, especially in small balance sheets, right, the sale activity allows you to truly stretch out your capital, but furthermore, really drive profitability in accomplishing something that you should technically not be able to do, which is grow and make money. Banks don't, they pick one path or the other. They normally don't do it at the same time. So my job at the bank was to truly drive profitability, and we did that from scratch. So how do you do that from scratch when you got someone who's read a lot but's never done it before? You got to use a lender service provider, right? If you're coming in from scratch, and that's what we did. Funny enough, they had contracted one because they wanted to do SBA. They've been looking for someone, but they got some leads. You know how most banks, right? I got a client that sounds like an SBA loan, and let me give it a shot, right? And they tried to do it like one-on-one, like on someone who had no background, work with the LSP. That was a horrible mess. I got there. The agreement they had signed was one-sided completely. It was just bad, right? So I came in. We swapped that LSP out for another group that I had developed some relationships with. And little by little, we started, I remember I got there in October. The first loan we were able to close officially, a $300,000 loan in March. So it took some time just to get the first one through. And that was a lot of work. And I think one of the follow-up questions that you're probably going to want to know is, what was the most difficult part of that process? And I was reflecting about that a lot. And I think it was the culture of the SBA credit process and risk profile. Going into an institution that has no comfort whatsoever or no historical experience with government guaranteed lending is in for a shock for what kind of credits you're going to see in government guaranteed lending, right? You and I both know
100%.
Credit elsewhere, baby, right? By definition, it's not in their wheelhouse. It can't be, right? So that was a toughie, man. Let's be honest. I had a lot of people to convince the hard way, from the chief credit officer who had never done an SBA loan in the past, to management, all the way to the president of the bank, right? The comments were, why are we putting our customers through these, very painful loan application processes, and jumping through all these hoops and taking all this time, and it's painful. But you know what? All of that changed once we sold the first loan on the secondary market. It was the funniest thing. It's happened more than once in my career. Those premiums, I don't want to use negative connotations, but they're like crack, right? I mean, it's addictive from a profitability perspective, right, and capital management perspective. The economics of an SBA division inside a bank are phenomenal, right? And that's actually been one of the keys to my career, Ray, is understanding those economics and then mitigating and maximizing those metrics for the benefit of the bank as well as for the borrowers, right? And then making sure that everyone in the middle is taken care of, right? From business development officers to back office, enjoying the fruits of their labor. But ultimately cracking that code and then distributing that across the entire stakeholder chain has allowed me to truly get a lot of buy-in across the entire footprint. So at First Green, one of the first things that I did, especially after we got buy-in, was roll out an incentive referral program through the entire institution, splitting to some degree my commission structures that I was generating from the loans. That way, it's that whole grow the pie, right? Instead of maximizing my cut. And I mean, it was beautiful. First year we ended, it was a tight year. We ended up doing, I think, like 17, 20 million in 7H from scratch. The second year, man, we were on pace to do about 37, 38 million, and then they sell the bank.
You were too successful. It became too profitable. They sold the bank. I'm just gonna say it. So like you kind of proved your model and that you were able to be successful when a lot of people in that position aren't. And I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, I think it's the bank's willingness to do SBA deals. I'm curious, did you have any of those conversations before you got into the bank about, hey, this is what these deals look like? Are we going to be able to get these approved?
Well, yes and no. It's during the application and interview process, everyone always says what you want to hear, right? Let's just be honest. It's different when the rubber hits the road. The silver lining that I had at first screen was the CEO who had brought me in wanted SBA because he had it at his last shop, and he knew the full cycle of what an SBA shop can do. So I had a champion at the top who would
That
support me.
helps.
Oh,
That helps a lot.
if it wasn't for that, I would not be where I am today. Right. That part of my career would not have the same ending. Um, yeah, I would say, for anyone who's thinking about that challenge, that's a good question to ask, right? Like the appetite for the SBA credit. We're accustomed to it. We know it very well, but from a conventional lender perspective, it is tough, man. It is tough. It's hard to get
Right.
accustomed to it. So that is probably, out of all the bits of information that someone needs to know whether they want to take an opportunity like that, is their credit appetite is probably the most important. Even for a BDO entering a new shop, you can get a higher commission structure, but if you're approving zero loans, 4% on zero is zero. So at the end of the day, I'll take my 1.5%, as long as you're approving all my loans. I'll tell you that all day.
So, okay, so you exit that venture and you go on to your next, which is similar in that you were also creating an SBA shop for another local bank. How did
Mm-hmm.
that opportunity get in front of you?
Funny enough, my phone starts to ring after the announcement of the sale of the bank happens, right? In one of those phone
Look at this
calls, surprise,
guy.
surprise, surprise,
Luckiest guy
surprise.
in the world over here.
I know. I'm on cruise control. Um, one of my former mentors from C1 Bank had become the president of Pilot Bank, and she was also the chief operating officer. And I've had a very good relationship with her. And then over the years, even when I wasn't at First Green, I was working with her on other issues like the American Bankers Association or Florida Bankers Association. All right. So here's another tip: stay involved and stay connected. Right.
Right.
Across the board, and that's important for us on Flago and Nagel and those fronts. Right. I digress. So she reaches out to me, and they've been trying to start an SBA division for some time. I even know, she's called me asking for advice on some other items. They had an LSP relationship, but they had started to bring on board some of the pieces for a full-blown internal SBA division. So that caught my curiosity. I didn't want to move from Miami. They're headquartered out of Tampa. I flew up and I met with the team, and lo and behold, I find out that they have a credit team, a credit CCO, chief credit officer, who had a lot of SBA background, a credit manager who had a lot of SBA background, and a couple underwriters and a couple processors who had a lot of SBA background. The only piece they didn't have was the front of the office in general, like someone who can manage the end-to-end experience. So that was a much better experience from the get-go. I mean, they didn't do any SBA loans before I got there. In the first year, I think we closed 39, 40 million out the gate. And that was a lot of fun, right? It's still, I had to update the policy. We had to establish parameters, but they were ready to go, and they knew that they needed this product, and they've been working on it. And I think I was more of a good piece, the final piece of the puzzle that needed to get it going, right? So I don't want to take full credit for that, but once it mixed together, it's been great. I mean, every year since inception, we've doubled the production of the division year over year for the last 3 years. So a knock on wood this year, I think we're probably hit somewhere, I don't know, 90 million, close to
And
100
that's
million.
only in Florida?
Only in the state of Florida. That's my footprint.
So for you to be doing that type of volume in only Florida, which puts you in the top 100 in the country with
We
only
are
one
top
state,
100. That is
is
correct. Yeah.
super impressive. And kudos to you for that and your team. Now, how many people do you have that do you manage people in this role?
Yes. Yes. That's always the fun part, right? That's the wild. I don't
I'm
know how many
really
books you can
intrigued on
read.
that. Yeah.
So I had 2 BDOs and I had 2 underwriters. I had 2 loan processors and a portfolio manager, right? So that's what, like 9 people, right? Um, it's always fun managing people, right? At the end of the day, the rules are easy, right? The SOP is easy.
Right.
Process is easy. It's the people that always throw the monkey wrenches in. But um, it's as long as you, the results that we've had, right, and the way that I manage is a lot of it, it's open, and I'm not a micromanager, right? Right. I'm a results oriented guy. If we're hitting our numbers, if our clients are happy, um, and the bank is protected, I'm pretty happy guy, right? So the team is, for the most part, especially the back office people, are really well experienced. The rookies on my team actually are all in business development, and we can jump into more detail on that in a minute. But having veteran back office people, key,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because as a director, right, you're worried about making sure that your status with the SBA is in good standing, right? You want to make sure that no one decision impacts your longevity in a program, or even, the profitability, right? We're generating great income, but if you have tons of losses on the back end, I mean, it's a net negative, right? So it's always that balancing act. But having a good back office is a great CYA. And that's another thing. If you're building out you need to have at least someone else that calls you out on SOPs, right? And I have people, and I empower my people to do that with me. So, 9 out of 10 times they call me for a question. I always, ask them, what does the SOP say? what what was the last procedural notice on this topic, right? I don't just blurt out the answer, because I want to teach everyone on my team, not all the details, but at least figure out how to get to the answer, right? And that's the most important part. Like I'm going to be transparent, and I'm sure you're going to agree with this. I don't know every rule the SBA has like the back of my hand. I know a lot, right? Because I've been doing it a long time, and those rules change and they get updated and they get treated differently, right? There's a lot of black and white, but there's a lot more gray. So having the ability to work through that gray, or work through items that you're not 100% confident on, with people inside your own institution that have that same ability to either know or find out the answer, is key. It's key. And that's, in my mind, more important than the back office, right? From a credit underwriting and loan processing perspective.
Right.
On the front end, the success we've had, my 2 guys, one is someone who's never been in banking before. We hired him 2 years ago. And frankly, he's been phenomenal. I think
Love that.
this year he's on pace to probably do about 23 million.
No experience coming in doing
Mm-hmm.
20 million plus, when 20, 25 year veterans can't even put up 10, 12 sometimes.
Yeah, that's a head scratcher for me. I never got how, and that's part of the BDO process that's always bothered me, Ray. BDOs are expensive, right, in general, and the bar's low for most institutions. I remember one of my first BDO jobs before I went to first screen. The minimum goal was $6 million, and I'm like, are you kidding me? That's the goal for the year, is $6 million. I get it, right? Florida has larger dollar volume, right, on a per loan transaction, right? Things are more expensive, right? So a piece of real estate in, I don't know, pick somewhere in the Midwest versus a piece of real estate, let's say in Miami, I bet you it's a little more expensive in Miami, right, on a per square footage basis. So that's definitely going to drive higher volumes. So that I'm not going to say that higher volumes of my guys is all based on skill, but we're still talking about a lot of loans, right? They're probably in that $23 million. His average loan size is probably right now about $500,000.
Wow.
So that's about 40 loans, man. That's 40
That's
loans
incredible.
that this guy's.
I
So
need to
how
get
did we
him on
do
the
that?
podcast.
Ha ha ha. Well, yeah, by all means. I would like to listen to what he says about me. Our second video is actually someone who transitioned from the commercial lending team last year and now has joined the team, and he's on pace to do about $30 million this year. And the beauty about him is that he already had his network, and all he had to do is learn the specifics on the products and how we attack the market. And I mean, he hit the ground running and has been doing great. And I think honestly, if you're going to grow an SBA division, um, I would put all my dollars hiring experienced people in the back office. Even I would even start all the way at the end, right, from loan servicing, loan operations, and then if you can get someone that's a veteran in underwriting, that'd be great. But that would start in the back end, and then work your way forward. And at the front end, I like training people, man. I like training people, and I like showing people what the SBA is without none of the historical BDO habits,
So
right?
so they don't have SBA, but what do they have? What are you looking for in them?
What are the qualities that I think make a good BDO, right? Attention to detail, self-starter. Um, you got to have an ability to carry a conversation and not be afraid to talk to people. You got to have the willingness to learn, right? Because this is going to be a lifelong learning process. This is not something that you're just going to pick up one year and then rinse and repeat. And finally, it's attitude, man. If you have the right attitude, understand that SBA is not easy. One of my pitches to my clients when I tell them, it's like, it's a hard process, man. I'm not lying. This is not something that people talk about how it's easy. It's hard, but you know what? Good. Not all good things. Well, what's a good expression? Would it be like, if it wasn't worth doing, it wouldn't be hard, right? So it's a club that you work to get into, and once you're in, you get all these options to be able to do a greater and bigger things. And that's what I tell my guys, and they understand that it's going to be tough. The first few loans, you go through that entire process, and they're like, oh my God, I can't believe we have to get a landlord lien waiver. We have to get or miscellaneous items. We have to get updated, signatures on all of our statements, right? Those are all things that aren't normal for most banks on the conventional side, right?
Luckily, I've never done anything other than SBA, so I don't even. This is normal to me. Maybe that's part of the secret. So, Javier, let me ask you this. So you've done it again. You helped grow another division. It's become very profitable. This one is that public, that thing, that right?
Yeah. What's that? Well, it's the well, how do they put it? It's the sale contract. They have a different way. The bank is being sold. You can say it. Go ahead and break it.
We'll go with that. That's fine. I mean, it just proves that you've been successful.
Definitive agreement.
Definitive agreement. Okay, there you go. That's what the lawyers have put in your brain. Okay. So, and you said something earlier. I mean, it's really, I think it's the crux of what this whole podcast is about. For example, you don't just do this, you have, you're a partner in a software company as well, right? And they focus on automating part of the process for lending, extracting numbers off tax returns, for example, inputting it into your spreads, automating this tedious part of the process. And I'm sure it's growing and evolving. And companies called Flash Spread, by the way.
Thank you for the plug.
But why are you doing this to yourself? You have all the you're I guess my question is, where does the drive come from? You said earlier, you want to see how high you can go. Where does that come from? Because you're not born with that.
I haven't really put too much thought on where it comes from. I can tell you what's motivating me.
Okay.
All right. So my father immigrated from Cuba, right, with nothing. And he came here. He started his own business, and he grew that. And with that small business, he was able to raise a family and support me to go to school and afford the life that I have today. Right. So I saw firsthand from a very young perspective what entrepreneurism is, and that bug has always been a part of my some people have a lot of hobbies. My entrepreneurism and business is something that I'm very passionate about, and that not for my just personal gain, but for the impact that it has in our community, in our state, in our country, right? And I can start talking about the impact that small businesses have from an employment perspective. About more than 50% of all employees are employed by small businesses, right? More than 50% of GDP output in this country is from small business. And well, you can't have big business unless you have small business, right? Apple, Facebook, Google, all the darlings that we have now, they all started in what, garages, and small, right? So if we don't support these critical people in our communities, then we're not going to be able to, I believe, maintain our number one status as the economic driver in the world.
Amen.
So
And I think that's a good place to leave it on. And I'm going to let you take care of that screaming little human upstairs.
no, no worries.
No, but thank you for joining, Javier. This has been super insightful, and I wish you luck in your future endeavors. I'm sure that they're going to be a lot more to come. Thanks,
I
man.
hope so. I hope so. And thank you for your time, Ray. I really appreciate it.
All right, I'll catch you later. Bye.